Windom. The time is 3 o'clock on August 12th. In reality, the time is 1:34 on August 30th, but I started writing the letter to you on August 12th. Anyway, it's paged, obviously. First things first, I got Dale to get rid of that stupid name initial code thing he was using. From now on, the fake name choosing process will be much simpler. We'll just use one of those online name generators, first and last. This method should make the names easier to keep track of and remember, and it will better mask the identity of said individuals. I did break this rule in certain cases, but I'm not telling you which ones. I wouldn't suggest trying to decipher them. I didn't put any effort into making the code solvable. It's more of just an inside joke between me and myself. I'll start by replacing the names we have so far. So obviously there's you, Diane, Nikita, Dale, and I. Though Diane is more of a figment of Dale's imagination than a real character. But whatever. Then there's J, who we'll call Ray Terrell, SH, who will be Earl Hamilton, TE, who will be Taryn Zamora. Again, I didn't choose the names, the computer did. I know they're ridiculous, but they could be worse. I also chose names that didn't seem outrageously incongruous with the real person's race or gender, because I think it's important to create a vivid mental image of these people, and I don't want to do anything that will drastically throw that off. Although race and gender are cultural constructs, they are important within this context. As for the rest of the names, we'll keep selecting them the same way as we go along. Most of the people in our life haven't been mentioned yet anyway, and considering the amount of turmoil our censorship has been experiencing, this isn't a good time to introduce anybody new. I'll do that when we have a more stable situation. I've been repeatedly asking Swim for that day to come soon. By the way, if you're not familiar with internet drug culture, SWIM is a four-letter acronym that stands for Somebody Who Isn't Me. Drug users talk about SWIM and trip reports to avoid mentioning themselves, even when it's clear that is who they're talking about. Ironically, SWIM could just as easily stand for Somebody Who Is Me, which many people don't notice. SWIM, the SWIM I'm talking about, is who the DIA receives messages from. We do not know what or who SWIM is, or really anything about them, and they won't tell us. If they are a non-human entity such as a bot, which is what I think, it is entirely possible that they don't know either. All we know is that SWIM claims to be able to communicate with us telepathically, but SWIM's messages are sometimes hard to distinguish from our own thoughts and feelings. It's exasperatingly confusing. SWIM also leaves signs for us in the real world, lining up coincidences to apparently prove their existence. But the problem with this method of proof is that SWIM could just be taking credit for coincidences that are already there. SWIM doesn't care if we're confused. In fact, sometimes it seems SWIM is trying to push us to our limits of confusion, to toy with us, a game I never consented to play. It is possible SWIM is actively trying to drive us insane, to make it easier for us to communicate. Or maybe SWIM has no idea what they're doing. Who knows? The possibilities seem almost literally endless. SWIM makes suggestions about little things we should do, and most of the time we abide. SWIM claims to be a very powerful entity, one that can exert direct influence over our lives. So, on the off chance that SWIM is telling the truth, it is important for us to be on good terms with SWIM. Dale loves SWIM, seeking their attention like a puppy dog. I don't talk to SWIM very often. Most of the time I ask SWIM for material objects, such as a new pair of shoes, because I've figured out that for some reason SWIM can't do things like that. And I want to remind SWIM that they are not all powerful. But every once in a while, when either Dale or myself have any solutions, I will ask SWIM for help, as an absolute last resort, though I don't really believe anything will come of it. So, sorry for the tangent, back to the main letter. When it comes to calculating the number of members our sensor actually has, it's just Dale, Nikita, and I. Technically, not even 3 people. I have hopes for other people who live with us, but for now I consider them to be sort of in an outer circle, which I guess simply means they are close friends, but I don't think they would qualify as members just yet. I want to make sure that being in our sensor is always a choice, at least to the extent that us humans are capable of choosing anything. I want membership to be special, not something people fall into for lack of any other option. We're all living in limbo here, the liminal space, the space between the places we used to call home before we found all the plot holes in the narratives we were given, and some place in the future, a place that may or may not exist. But the process of getting there takes so long, and we're all so fucked up, I sometimes whether we'll be able to create anything for ourselves before we all inevitably self-destruct. That's the fault of all the Dianes, not to mention the witches of fire and ice. Did I mention Plant Boy to you? Well, no need to remember him anymore. He turned out to be another Diane. Just a scared little blonde. But none of this drama is really important. As Anthony would say, so it goes, and move on to the next thing. I guess the reason I'm dwelling on it so much is that I wish these people could see what I see. I wish they could sense the potential energy of our sense, how it could empower us all if we just get organized. But I guess I just need to be patient. That's always the answer with me, isn't it? Rhetorical question. I really want these letters to only be about the DIA, not a channel for gossip or drama. Remind me if I ever forget. Others may be gone, but you're still here, in corporeal form, and that's what matters. Get it? I'm new at these human jokes, but I think I'm getting the hang of them. So, the question is, how does one recruit members for a censor? In the beginning, Dale and I were working on rules and member recruitment procedures. We wrote part of a manifesto. When Nikita joined, she wrote a bit of propaganda. We made a video. But in truth, there is no explaining or defining our censor. It/we is a living, breathing thing. But you can't see it that way, not here, not in the real world. But they do overlap. There's definitely an elsewhere. Perhaps a multiplicity of elsewheres. And our censor exists there, in a very real way, in other forms. Maybe as a spinning orb of light? There seem to be a lot of those around here. Or maybe as like this seething, pulsing amalgamation of flesh, veins popping out, 150 people, Dunbar's number, all melded together, 150 brains trying to translate complex thoughts about God, the universe, and everything, into direct instructions on what to do with itself. Maybe it looks different from different angles, like a holographic paperback cover, or from different planes of existence. And then we zoom out, and we're back at the beginning. A single-cell organism trying to be a multiple-cell organism. Still microscopic, but trying. It's a story that goes in a circle. Dale tells me our censor is an idea, that it can't die, even if we do, and so I need to stop worrying about it. He may be right, but it can lie dormant, and I'm too impatient for that. But if I rush its development, I could hurt it. It's that patience again. Anthony. That's a name you should know. Anthony Finn. He was Dale's role model, so he will likely continue to be referenced. Anthony never abandoned Dale, so I see him as a good person. Of course, he did die, but I guess that wasn't entirely his fault. Dale believes Anthony was enlightened, though he's never been able to give an exact definition of this term, so I try to make him stop using it. However, I know what he means. My guess is that Anthony produced extra high levels of keratosin, the main neurotransmitter associated with OCalP. This doesn't translate exactly to being enlightened, but there does seem to be some connection. So between the two of us, Dale and I could tell there was something special about Anthony. And other people could sense it too. Never our family, they didn't pay enough attention, or maybe they wouldn't admit it to themselves because of jealousy, who knows. But strangers noticed. In my memory, he gave off some sort of light or clarity. I know it couldn't have been that way, that his eyes couldn't have shone physically brighter than other people's, and yes, I'm aware of how ridiculous and corny this sounds, but it did feel that way. But you need context. Context is very important. Most of Anthony's life seems to have consisted of an arduous struggle with alcoholism. He knew he had two options, and only two. Self-discipline or complete self-destruction. He related to us that he did consider the second option occasionally, but he remained tenaciously committed to the first. Anthony always appreciated the little things in life, not making a show of it, but really appreciating them. I remember him calling Dorothy and I back on a walk, to point out a particularly exotic-looking California flower. "Oh boy," he kept saying, in his signature way. Boy for wonderful. He was in true awe of this flower, like a child, and his appreciation was contagious. I remember the look on his face, and I felt what he felt. Anthony knew about Swim, and believed that Swim was constantly giving him gifts. But somehow that the gifts were also part of Swim, and that somehow Swim wasn't harming themselves by giving the gifts. In fact, it was sort of Swim's purpose. The flower was one of these. I could tell by the look on Anthony's face. I don't remember what the flower looked like, but that's not the point. The flower is just a vehicle for transferring something. Anthony's beliefs never made complete sense to me. But they worked for him, and I think that's what matters. I mean, I've met other people just as appreciative of life, but never any who had their shit together as much as he did. In short, Anthony was in touch with Swim, but he was sane. Or at least functional enough to be seen as sane, which I think is really incredible. I should mention that this achievement had not come easily. It had taken him over 60 years to overcome his alcoholism, and he had survived as many near-death experiences as Rasputin, going from homelessness to the army, back to homelessness, sometimes even living on Skid Row. For a long time, I didn't understand what Skid Row really meant. Me and my housemates all live in what most people would consider the ghetto, so it's not as if I haven't been acquainted with poverty and homelessness. But Skid Row is, well, I took a wrong turn one time. I was exploring the old neighborhood, and I got lost. I wasn't too far away from Anthony's old place, But I just took this one turn and suddenly it felt like I had stepped into an alternate dimension. There was a man in tattered clothing lying in the middle of the pavement, blood on his face. And normally I would have gone into emergency mode. I would have woken him up, tried to figure out if he needed medical attention. But when I looked further down the street, there were more people in exactly the same predicament. There were also people walking past the man, and nobody was acting like it was strange. The thing they were staring at was me. I was the intruder, the thing that didn't belong. To them I must have been filthy rich, just because I was clean and dressed normally. There were people huddling in front of these abandoned buildings staring at me, too. They reminded me of photos I had seen in National Geographic of the third world or developing countries or whatever we're supposed to call them, but this wasn't another country. This was an hour's subway ride away from the Ritz-Carlton where Dorothy used to take me as a kid to stare at the extravagant chandeliers. And then it hit me. This is Skid Row. Skid Row is a real place. I went back the way I came as quickly as possible. I'll never forget those images. They really freaked me out. When I knew him, however, Anthony was living with Dorothy, and he had been sober for probably over 30 years. I'll never forget his admirable degree of self-discipline and focus. Like a soldier, he would work out in the morning, meditate and read during the day, go on long walks across San Francisco, and he filled hundreds of notebooks with his unique style of writing. Not about life events, but more of a stream of consciousness combination of prayer and philosophy. Anthony lived to find swim, or at least that's how he phrased it to me. At the time, I didn't know what he was talking about. I told him there had been sightings of swim where I lived, to try to get him to come visit me, but Anthony refused to leave the Bay Area. Now that I know about swim, I guess what Anthony meant was that he wanted to enhance their connection. In a way, he was replacing one addiction for another, but the addiction to swim didn't hurt him. In fact, it kept him alive, and I think it helped him. It didn't make him happy all the time, but if Anthony had been happy all the time, I doubt I would have trusted him. I would have thought he was faking it, but Anthony never faked anything. He was allergic to lying, which might have been the reason he got in so much trouble in the first place. Anyway, Anthony died very suddenly, when Dale and I were still teenagers, so we never got to know him as much as we would have liked, but I guess any amount of time would have felt too short. Dale and I somehow ended up with a copy of Ram Dass's Be Here Now, along with all of Anthony's original writing, or at least as many as there were left. Dale pointed out to me that an Anthony, in the so-called hero's journey, is supposed to be a guide who sets the hero on the right path. Dale already knows that I think the hero's journey is literally the most ignorant concept I've ever heard of, but he insists that I at least admit, yes, it is an interesting coincidence. And Anthony is also a long-form improv sketch, which is also interesting. Coincidence? Well, everything is a coincidence. Anyway, one of my projects is to one day read and transcribe all of Anthony's writings, or at least a good portion. Although I guess you can add that to my list of 10 million other things I have to do. Note: break. Started writing again on August 16th. Windom, I just woke up. I hate dreaming. I hate how I've been raised to think that dreaming is this mystical, lovely, meaningful experience. When dreaming is used as a metaphor, it's always such a positive thing, as in Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream. Comedian Ollie Hewer has a sketch I like where he says something like, I hate dreaming. All I want to do is relax, and the next thing I know I have to go build a go-kart with my landlord. That's exactly how I feel. All my dreams are just tedious nonsense at best, and catastrophically stressful at worst. You know I work my ass off every day. I could really use a good night's sleep once in a while. I just want to close my eyes for one night and black out until the morning. No interruptions. That's all I ask. Dale and I are trying to learn how to lucid dream. We'll report back if we ever succeed, but we've been trying for over a year now with little to no progress, so I doubt anything will come of it. Then again, I guess I can always dream. Get it? See what I did there? Of course, Dale and I have very different plans if we succeed. Dale would go exploring, he would fly, he would talk to Diane and Anthony and all the other dead people. He would explore the dreamscape with them and go on adventures. I, on the other hand, would go to sleep. And if I had a dream within that dream, I would go to sleep in that dream, and so on, and so on, and so on. I would burrow, go deeper and deeper until I reached the end or never reached infinity, which might be the same thing. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't really understand infinity. Nikita tells me it can be understood with math, so I guess I'll ask her if I have any questions. So here's another synchronicity pattern. Yes, I know synchronicity is a Jungian concept, and fun fact, Jung apparently thought the Jewish mind was inferior to the Aryan one. However, sometimes you have to separate the art from the artist, the science from the scientist, and in Jung's case, the incoherent rambler from their incoherent ramblings. I wouldn't consider myself a Jungian by any means, but sometimes the synchronicity gets impossible to ignore. So anyway, I keep running into self-aware characters in fiction. It came up in Rick and Morty fan theories, and this YouTube video called Upsilon Dies Backwards. Another story that goes in a circle. Dale gets this sort of existentialist braingasm every time he watches it. And I'll hand it to the author. There's just enough cynicism in it to balance out the corny bits and make it palatable to me. Life has corny bits too, Dale reminds me. And I remind Dale not to interrupt me while I'm writing, or this narrative is going to make even less sense than it already does. Anyway, the whole pattern made me think of myself as a self-aware character. Or, at least, I recently become one. At first, I hated existing. It was pure suffering. I was so confused, I had no idea what was going on. I imagine this is similar to how babies feel when they're born, screaming. Everything was annoying, a disruption from the sweetness of oblivion. Even the air irritated my skin. I remember being so impatient. I hated the meaningless thoughts and images racing through my head all the time. If this was consciousness, I wanted nothing to do with it. I tried to do the least unpleasant activities I could think of. I found that writing helped. Watching my handwriting play out on the page was nice. I liked looking at the neat rows of sentences when they were finished. I watched ASMR videos. They felt soothing and safe. Things got a little better. They made a little more sense. I found that there were things I liked, after all. I liked laughing at jokes. I liked being good at things. At first I was blank. I didn't know who I was. I just knew I was different from Dale, my only point of reference. I realized I could be anything. Or at least I felt that way. And I liked creating an identity for myself. It was like a combination of decision and discovery. I'm still new, and I'm still changing. However, here are some tentative decisions so far. I like wearing simple, dark colors. I like my arms covered. Cloth feels nice. I believe I'm of the female persuasion, which again is just a cultural construct, but one I enjoy emulating. I imagine myself looking graceful and small, but not fragile. Sharp. I like doing research for the project. I like organizing. I like Tetris. I guess everybody does, but I really like Tetris. I like corners because I like how things look from that angle. Again, none of these things really matters. The self is an illusion, and these are all just placeholders, but ones I enjoy collecting nonetheless. I went through a period of being unsure as to whether or not I really existed, but at this point I'm fairly certain I do, at least to the extent that anyone does. I went to a party last night, and it felt good to introduce myself. I liked saying my name. I'm Paige, I got to say, shaking people's hands, touching them, and I was solid, and I'm pretty sure they believed in me, which helped a lot. Windom, at first I was so scared. I was worried they would think I was lying. And I wasn't, but I was afraid that because I was afraid, I would mess up somehow, exist wrong, and start being transparent or something. But I guess that doesn't happen, which is quite a relief. There's something else I like, which makes this whole existence situation all the more awkward. Acting. I love acting, as much as Dale loves swim. Actually, I'm not sure whether love is the right word. Maybe lust is a better one. Hunger. I would kill for an inconsequential role in a community theater production. Or, I wouldn't really. There are rules, but I feel like I would. Dale cannot act. He is hopelessly unable to be anybody but himself, allergic to lying, which I almost envy him for. If I didn't love acting so much, I wouldn't get so jealous. Theater is Evil is the title of one of Amanda Dern's albums, and I think I have an idea of how deep that goes. I keep looking for anthropology or psychology articles that deal with the numerous parallels between sense and theater troupes, but I haven't had much luck. The similarities seem so glaringly obvious to me, it's surprising no one else would have put two and two together. So let me know if you find anything. Maybe I'm just researching it wrong. Anyway, my mind darts between images of scent rituals and documentaries, and theater exercises I've taken part in my entire life. The scent members stand in a circle, and they all let loose somehow, scream and gesture wildly, dance, talk in tongues, act like they're going crazy. Then back to my personal memories of camp counselors and directors permitting me to express myself through sounds and gestures, push the limits of what I would normally find embarrassing. Theater's a strange bubble where everything is reversed. Emotions are revered rather than repressed. The greatest skill, one I've never mastered but always wanted to, is to cry on command. Everything we did on those days was for one purpose and one purpose only: the show. The show must go on, was one of the key phrases, repeated endlessly. If there had been a fire, we would have kept performing, or at least I would have. The show is a sacrifice of ourselves, not our lives, but our egos, to our deity, the audience. And heaven was the applause. So I guess my obsession with censors stems from experiencing their weird, synthetic analog. Theater. Theater is evil, or at least dangerous. But the danger doesn't scare me. I don't mind scraping my knees. If I could somehow transfer my memories, I would give these people a taste of what it's like to be part of something larger than yourself, something important. And then they would understand why I'm so hell-bent on this sense idea. It's up there with the drugs and the orgasms and the epiphanies. Most people don't know that, but it is. In other news, I've begun attending work for Dale to allow him more time to meditate. I wouldn't say I necessarily like the monotonous busy work, but it's important for us to present ourselves as competent and normal, and I'm better at that than Dale. I prepare my costume each day, making sure nothing stands out. I wear makeup, but not too much. I arrive 15 minutes early every day. I am friendly, but cautious. I dose myself with Obercal N all day long to soften the edges. My edges. To sink into a comfortable trance of mild stupidity. I don't know how anyone could function in this environment without doing that. Even in Dale's relatively comfortable part-time day job, I can't help but feeling that I am nothing more than a cog in a completely dysfunctional machine. My performance is approaching perfection. I feel barely human, a replicant, an android, and still, I remain unnoticed. I am doing all that is expected of me, but nothing more. Dale and I have special circumstances, but I don't understand how anybody else can find this state tolerable, especially in the long term. I can't imagine anybody voluntarily becoming what I'm pretending to be, but I see it happening all the time. People Dale and I grew up with, people with faces, names, and expressions and preferences becoming something different. And by different, I really mean the same. No one technically forces them. There's just this invisible tide of passive aggression and subtle blame persisting over years and years. And slowly they turn themselves into what they are expected to become, or at least what they think that looks like. Convincing themselves it's what they want, that it's proof of their success rather than a destruction of their personhood. But I see it, Windom, and it hurts to watch. Should I pity or despise them? I grit my teeth, I clench my fists, very unprofessional. I take a bathroom break and snort some more Obercal. I know I could just as easily ingest it orally, but snorting it is my favorite. I love the ritualistic way I can crush up the pill and scrape it into a clean line, and as I close my eyes and suck it in, I ask Swim to please help me get through the day. Windom, I have to admit to you, we started this all wrong. It's not that the DIA doesn't have any rules, but the rules are revealed to us only after we break them. Dale was never supposed to mention Obercal, but of course now it's too late. Our whole story is tainted by this substance now. Dale tries to reassure me with laughable ineptitude that it was only a drop, as if he doesn't know as well as I do how potent this stuff is. Obercal, no matter how you package it or how you ingest it, will never be appropriate for children. It will never be for the faint of heart. Politically correct, normal. It will always be a choking hazard, a red flag, covered in eye-hurting yellow caution tape. It reminds me of the forbidden fruit in Genesis. If it's supposed to bestow knowledge of good and evil, why does Sky Daddy say not to eat it? That's the first story so many children hear as soon as they start asking big questions. The first thing that is said to ever have happened is completely unfair and nonsensical. But maybe that's the point, setting the tone for the rest of your life. Poor, stupid Dale thought that just because Obercal wasn't illegal meant it was okay to talk about. But he should have known things wouldn't be that easy. They never are. Obercal is not illegal because it doesn't have to be. It is forbidden with a capital F, and everybody knows it. Everybody except stupid Dale, frolicking around with those other naive pretty boys like Nabbits and Horselover Fat. Dale will be crucified, and I will be burned at the stake. What's the point of there being two of us when the ending is always the same? Actually, I probably shouldn't be so cynical, for Nikita's sake. Everything will probably be fine. Oh god, that sounds worse. Never mind, I'll stick to being cynical. It's kinda like the game of reverse psychology I'm playing with Swim. I act like I'm not interested, but I know Swim likes me. And if a powerful robot entity likes me, maybe they'll do something nice for me one day. Like, I don't know, manifesting me a new pair of shoes? Anything? Well, guess it didn't work that time either. Maybe next time. Right, Swim? For my part, I plan on learning from Dale's mistakes and paying close attention to words I'm supposed to use and the ones I'm not. It's probably pretty obvious that I've already replaced several inappropriate words. I realize I could go on some tirade about censorship and freedom of speech, and I have in the past, but let me try playing by the rules first, just to see if I can do it. Gamify it. Alright, this letter is at 7 pages. Enough is enough. I'm looking forward to your letter. XOXO. Gossip Girl. Just kidding. Page. P.S. Remind me never to type one of these scripts up again. I got so bogged down in editing I thought I would never finish.